The United States just toppled Iran's government in a single night. Khamenei, 40 senior officials, all gone in a coordinated strike campaign the president says could last just 4 weeks. He's publicly calling for regime change. No congressional vote, no declaration of war, and already a mass shooting in Austin is being investigated for Iranian terror links. So, on this episode of Liberty Lens, we're going to find out who authorized this, what's the end game, and what does the blowback cost us here at home? And here to help me answer some of these very important questions, none other than my friend and co-host, Mr. Mike Tremont. Mike, how are you doing tonight?
Great to be with you. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances, but I'm glad to be with you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, Mike, and unfortunately, your prognostication prowess was right on the mark. 2 weeks ago, we were talking, and you said, I have a feeling we're going to be talking about the invasion of Iran soon. You flat out predicted it for me. You weren't off by much. Maybe tell us a little bit what made you so certain we were going to invade Iran within a very short time frame? I mean, this wasn't a general proclamation you made. You told me like, hey, in the next week or two, I think we're going to invade Iran. What brought you to that state of mind?
Well, you give me more credit than I think it deserves. The president was sending military assets, most especially the aircraft carrier groups, two of them, to the region, one on either side of Iran. So it was clear that he was, at the very least, putting pressure on. The only real issue was whether he was going to negotiate and tolerate a protracted negotiation or whether he was just going to strike. And I've been under the impression that the president doesn't have a lot of appetite to negotiate with people like, Khamenei, the now deceased supreme leader of Iran, and the regime that surrounded him, and remnants of which may apparently still be in some sort of power. I think that the president correctly, by the way, estimated that the regime in Tehran didn't really have much appetite either for negotiating in good faith. I think that in some sense, this was a fake negotiation between two parties, neither of which were all that interested in taking the other one very seriously. And I think that Tehran was making a huge mistake. I don't think the president really hid for some time now. I don't think he hid his disdain for the regime or his interest in getting rid of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I kind of see the same. I Not just me, a lot of people see the same pattern as what happened with Venezuela, right?
Sure.
The initial patriotic rah rah USA number one reason the president and his cohorts gave was, hey, we're getting rid of a bad dude. We're liberating the Iranian people. Blah blah blah. Very similar to, hey, Maduro's a bad dude.
Yep.
He's a convicted drug dealer. We're liberating the
Yep.
Venezuelans. Blah blah blah.
Yep.
And then almost shockingly, like I don't even think a day went by, the president is on video saying, we want regime change. We want a new government in there. We want the people to throw out the current,
Rise up and take over.
rise up, MIGA, make Iran great again, or whatever
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
stupid
Yeah.
meme
Yeah.
was. So Mike, again, I have to ask this, and again, I know we're in a position of sounding like we're sympathetic to a horrible, horrible regime, to a horrible, horrible.
Well, we haven't gone there yet, and we don't have to.
But the point here is that, again, we can say, like, look, Khamenei going is probably in the best interest of everybody involved. But does the United States have either the legal or the moral standing to go around the world and just decide which governments it should topple? And again, also, we'll talk about it, and for motives other than the security of the United States.
Well, there's three important questions there, aren't there? Number one, is the world better off without these people in power? I don't think there's any question that if the regime in Tehran, right, the Islamic Republic. If it were to go away, the world would be a better place. The Iranian people would be better off. That its neighbors, to which it has been belligerent, including through Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis. The Iranian regime has been belligerent, dangerous, I would say volatile, but consistently volatile. Like, right? The only thing you can predict is that it's going to be violent. You just don't know when and where from one year to the next. The world would be better off. The real question in that regard is whether or not the regime is going to be replaced, because replacing the supreme leader with his son, which seems as likely an outcome as any at this point, wouldn't be a great deal of change, right? To be fair, we don't know that with any certainty, but nor do we know it would be any better if it were different, right?
Right.
But the most likely outcome is probably that the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, is going to take over. They will decide whether or not they need a couple of mullahs, a couple of clerics as a front to maintain control. But the idea that this is going to go towards some libertarian Republican democracy, right? That's not going to happen. The most you can hope for is that you get a regime in there that's a little bit less belligerent, a little bit more realistic, maybe a little bit more either willing to deal with us and the Europeans, or at least more fearful of the American government and European governments, maybe a little bit more fearful of the Israeli government. I think looking for a regime in Tehran that's more respectful of Israel is probably asking for too much. But at the very least, I think that there's reason to be optimistic, just not very optimistic, right?
Right.
I think the big reason to be optimistic is spinning the wheel is better than sticking what we had, right? It's almost impossible to imagine any change not being for the better.
Well, that was going to be my question. That was going to be my next question to you, right? Just like in Brazil, we said getting rid of Maduro is good, depending on
in Venezuela, right?
Venezuela, sorry, not Brazil, is better, assuming that what comes in is something we can deal with, right?
And she's better, if for no other reason than she works with us.
Right.
You know, she's a little bit fearful of Washington. She'll be better behaved. But as a matter of philosophy, is she better, less corrupt? No.
Right. And the same thing applies to Iran, right? Like you mentioned, they got rid of all the leadership, according to both the U.S. and a lot of reports coming out of the region. Not only was the Supreme Leader Khamenei killed, but 40 other of the top brass, the top government,
mostly in the initial in the same series of explosions. They was at a meeting where they were all in attendance.
Almost, I'm sure it was thanks to intelligence, but they were all in the same spot. What hit them all at once, right? So let's leave the moral and political implications aside for the second.
The next question is whether it's legal. The next question you asked is the legality.
Well, yeah, but before we get to the legality, it's like general. What's your gut feeling though? Is what replaces the head we cut off of this Hydra going to be better, worse, the same?
No, my expectation would be it would be the same. The only reason I'm optimistic is because it introduces some randomness, and it can hardly be worse. The ways in which it could be worse, besides just being more brutal to its own people, more belligerent to Arabic neighbor states, less respectful of Israel, less fearful of the United States. In addition to all of that, which it could be theoretically, but in addition to all that, we can have a civil war. There is now a rumor going, slightly more than a rumor, a preliminary report, that the CIA is working with Kurdish forces to try to make a movement toward Tehran. What could go wrong, John? What could go wrong? The CIA thinks it'd be a good idea to have a civil war in Iran. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah,
So
it's not like the CIA's record is bad or anything in these cases, in these scenarios.
all over the world, and specifically in Iran. So, uh, especially with Kurds. So, what could go wrong? So that's one thing. The other thing that could go wrong is that there could be a civil war between the IRGC and the regular military and the Quds forces. These are all not completely independent in the sense that they were all reporting to the Ayatollah, but um, they're slightly independent. And if you cut off the head, you've got these different military forces inside the nation that have different organizational structures. They have been from time to time in the past jealous of each other's proximity to power and influence over policy. So you could imagine, I haven't seen any reports that it's starting, because right now they're all unified in defense of the nation. But you could easily imagine a power vacuum giving rise to a civil war there among military factions. And then the third thing I could imagine going wrong and making the situation even worse relates to President Trump's call for folks. He did say, good for him. He was responsible and said, everyone hunker down, stay inside. It's going to be extremely dangerous. But he had also said before then that he wants people to take over, right? Rally, take to the streets, take over your government. This is your big opportunity. This is an opportunity like you're not going to have in the future. What could go wrong? You're speaking to a population who just lost somewhere between 30 and 35,000 people murdered by the regime for protesting. For protesting. So now the President of the United States says, in no uncertain terms, you should go out and take over your government. Oh, and by the way, it's not our intention to put troops in the streets, American troops, right? So, in effect, I'm just adding 2 and 2 here and getting 4. Good luck with that, right?
Right.
That's a tough situation.
Well, it's a tough sell again. And, the libertarians are constantly playing the Ron Paul clips, from the 90s, warning about this. And of course, like you said, it's not like the CIA has this wonderful, spotless track record of these things going back, and interventionism, it always ends up blowing up in our faces. Uh, and one has to wonder now, given like Pete Hegseth, and we've seen what he's like. We've seen what the president is like. One has to ask, Mike, are there any voices of temperance, of slowing down, of taking a breath here? Like, where's the Tulsi Gabbards of the world? Supposedly, JD Vance was someone who
Yeah,
would
I was
be
going to say
against
there's
this
two
stuff.
voices right there. They're just not being raised. And I heard something, John. I was fascinated. I was watching. Doesn't matter. Jonah Goldberg. He was on CNN tonight. I,
Okay,
I think he's a very interesting guy. I think he's very smart. He said something I found really interesting because people brought up this idea. Where's JD? Right?
right,
JD is the one who said he's going to support President Trump specifically because I'm going back 10 years now. He's going to
right,
support him specifically because he was anti-war. He's not going to get us into foreign wars, right? And then, 16 months ago, Vance is saying we should not go to war with Iran. It'd be too expensive. It'd be dangerous, uh, hugely expensive, not productive, not ethical, blah, blah, blah. The whole range of reasons. And President Trump is not going to get us into such a war. Vote for us, right? This is his big pitch in October before the November election. And Jonah Goldberg was saying, it's too bad that the vice president is required to back up the president of the United States no matter what. There's some sort of requirement. I'm watching TV and not paying too much attention, except I think Jonah's a good guy. And it occurred to me, No, he's not.
No, you're right. He's
No,
not.
he's absolutely not. In the administration, in the White House, in the entirety of the executive branch, all of the cabinet, right? Everyone who reports to the cabinet. Never mind civil servants just for a minute. You can get rid of civil servants if they misbehave.
Right.
Anyone else you can get rid of like this, right? Everybody. There's only two people in the administration that you can't get rid of. One's the first lady. You would need a divorce attorney, and she may have one. I'm not saying she
Right.
doesn't. The other one's the vice president. The vice president is the only guy who is not required to fall in line.
Right.
And I found that so ironic that Jonah would say what most Americans I think would be. I'm not picking on him because he's a dingaling. Like I said, I think he's uber smart. That's why I was listening to him. But he said what I think most Americans just assume to be true. The vice president has to fall in line. No, the truth is the vice president is the only guy who
Right.
does not need to fall in line because he's the only one in the administration who cannot be fired.
You're absolutely right. And I think most people don't view it that way. Because if you think about Gabbard and you think about Hegseth and you think about whoever else, Noam, Bondi, all the other usual cast of comedic characters, they're all there at the pleasure of the president, basically. The
And
vice
they act
president,
like it,
right.
which
But
is too bad.
the only one who's been elected is Vance. Therefore, he cannot be removed unless it's through impeachment, right?
And not by Trump, impeachment by Congress.
Right, that's the point. Trump can't just wake up one day and say you're gone, right? Like just like you want to do with Pence.
So there's only one guy with the latitude to speak his ethical mind.
Now, what about the premise here that Vance doesn't know what to do? Because, and we're deviating a little bit, but the he can't stand up to. He's in a no man's land, isn't he? If he stands up to Trump too or voices his displeasure at this too loudly, he risks being distancing himself too far from Trump's coattails for 2028. But if he supports it too much, we're already seeing the backlash within MAGA. Like a lot of these
Right.
super
Okay.
MAGA.
So you're characterizing it correctly as a political balancing act.
Right.
Jumping over the ethics and the legality. Well, I mean, yeah, it's illegal and unconstitutional.
Right.
Never mind. Just hold for a moment. Never mind that.
Right.
Whether or not, number two, is it in America's long-term interests, which
Right.
we haven't fully teased out yet. We
No,
haven't
we haven't.
finished these two issues. But push aside whether it's a good idea. Push aside whether it's
Right.
legal. Two different issues.
Right.
Immediately jump to the political calculation, which is how we think too often. I would love it if JD Vance would say, you know what? I got to be honest. I don't know whether this is going to help me get elected president or hurt me. It might be a tough call, right? I don't know which way this is going to go. Trump's on the way down, and the anti-war crowd is on the way up inside the GOP. So maybe I got to do that, and that's where I came from, or maybe I need the president's coattails. Who knows how he's going to be strong in 2020? Okay. I don't know about all that, but I do know this. Doing something that's illegal and unconstitutional is not in America's interest in the long run because it leads to authoritarianism and it leads to silly people coming to power after we leave office that we can't trust, we shouldn't trust. And the framers had a damn good idea by saying Congress had to be the branch that weighed in on whether or not we go to war. I don't know if this is going to be good for my political future, but I got to be a little bit honest here. I think a lot of, I would send them $50 right there on the spot, right?
Right.
But that's not what we hear these days, is it?
No, and it's unfortunate because again, on the political front, I saw a fascinating exchange, and to me, it summarizes the whole MAGA universe right now. It was between Megyn Kelly and MTG, Marjorie
Yep.
Taylor Greene, on Megyn Kelly's show. It was either yesterday or the day before yesterday, where for all her goofiness, Green came on and said the president has betrayed MAGA. This is not America first. I don't go to bed at night worrying about an Iranian missile hitting the U.S. And I think she's spot on that one issue. She's absolutely right. I don't think there was any sort of imminent threat. And Megyn Kelly, as much as she agreed with MTG, had to be very measured in her response. She goes, well, I agree with you, but the president has all this intel that we're not privy to and we may never be privy to, so we have to trust him.
Megyn is bending over backward to be dumber than she is. Megyn knows full well that the intelligence reports have said there was no imminent threat. Megyn also knows, as we all do, that the president doesn't pay any attention to
Right.
what the intelligence reports say from his own government. He doesn't listen to Tulsi Gabbard. He doesn't listen to the civil servants in her branch, whether it's the CIA or the NSA. He doesn't listen to them. He makes up his own mind. And we all also know what he told us.
Right.
He told us that they would eventually develop weapons that could attack us someday. This is what he told us, right? I'm not making this up. He told me. I didn't tell him. He told us that they couldn't reach us, right? That they could go after our forward bases.
Right.
He said that. And he said something fascinating today, John. I'm glad that you brought this up. He said something fascinating today. He said, I had a feeling that they were going to attack us soon. Okay, I'll give you that. I'm actually okay with that. Never mind trying to be smart. Never mind using intelligence. Never mind listening to advisors. Never mind relying on facts. Let's just go with the president of the United States.
He had a hunch. He had a hunch.
He had a hunch. Okay, he had a hunch they're going to attack us.
Right. Okay.
Let's suppose that that's legal, right?
Right.
Okay. The next thing he said was, more than other people expected it. Well, I don't know. Maybe Marco Rubio thought so too. I should ask him. What? You just told the president of the United States went on national television and told us he did not know the opinion of the Secretary of State.
Right.
Who had recently been his security advisor and Secretary of State both, right? He did not know his opinion on whether or not Iran was going to attack us, and went with his hunch.
Crazy.
Now, and maybe Marco had the same hunch.
But to not know it.
Wait, but Marco the day before said the reason we attacked when we did, he clarified he didn't mean the reason we attacked, but the reason for the timing was that Israel was committed to certain timing, and therefore if we didn't attack, Israel would attack without us. There'd be blowback. The blowback would be dangerous for us. We thought it was safer if we attacked at the same time.
Okay.
That's what he said.
Before you continue, I wanted you to, I'm glad you brought it up because that was going to be my next follow-up, which was, okay, the president went by his hunch. I'm more perturbed by that than you are, apparently. But fair enough. He had a hunch. He admitted that he didn't know if Rubio had the same hunch or not. But then Rubio got up in front of the cameras and said, in essence, we did this to support Israel because they weren't going to listen to us. They were going to attack anyway. He positioned it as if we tried to talk him out of it. I'm implying, he didn't say this, I'm implying from what he said, that we might have tried to dissuade them from attacking. They were going to attack anyway. We decided to join in. And again, much like a lot of what some Republicans are saying now, you have to ask yourself, do they know these are bad ideas, but they just can't stand up to Big Daddy in the Oval Office? Is that what's going on here? Because if you're saying, I know there's going to be blowback if Israel attacks, why would you then align with Israel on the blowback? If you didn't feel it was necessary, if there was no imminent threat, and again, for a lot of
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
trolls, the War Powers Resolution and War Powers Act allows the president to take action in defense of U.S. interests in the face of an imminent threat
Only.
only. Not like he has the right to do it as long as he calls up Congress, or as Rubio said, we didn't notify Congress, we notified the Gang of Eight, and they had their 48-hour notice or whatever the case was. And it's like, no, no, no. That's just the first two legs of that tripod. The third and most important one, which are guys like Massey, Rand Paul, Justin Amash, and everybody kept reminding people, is it's in the face of an imminent threat. Now, imminent threat is open to interpretation, but that's part of the consultation with Congress. What is that? What is the president's hunch that everyone's relying on? What's his hunch? What's the timing behind it? Are we okay with it? So,
Yeah.
talk to me about that, Mike. Are people communicating, or are they all just deathly afraid of Trump?
No, they're all deathly afraid of Trump. The reason you and I say every week that he gets crappy staff work is because he gets crappy staff work. And the reason he gets crappy staff work is because he has not enough interest in good staff work. If you don't at least know what your Secretary of State is thinking, now you might think he's an idiot, but we've seen Marco Rubio for years. From time to time, he drives us crazy because he's got these conservative quirks and these neocon quirks in certain areas. But say what you will, the guy's no dummy, right?
Oh, he's not.
If he worked for me, damn right I'd be seeking his opinion, his advice. I'd be like, Marco, I got this hunch. Now, if Marco says, you know what, boss, your hunch is stupid, I might say, yeah, go pound sand, Marco. I still like my hunch. That could happen. But going into war without knowing what your Secretary of State is thinking, that's not just a rejection of Marco Rubio. That's weird. That goes in the weird, like, why are you employing these people type of category, right?
Right.
The other thing that needs to be said about the War Powers Resolution, and good for you for referring it to such, because a lot of folks call it the War Powers Act, which is not really accurate. It's more of a shorthand. The War Powers Resolution, for the youngsters out there, was passed in 1973, which is everything you should need to know about congressional intent. It was not to convey power to the president. It was to limit it, right? Nobody in 1973 was interested in giving the White House more power, right?
Right.
We were, working our way through the Imperial Nixon years, and people were fed up with Nixon and Kissinger going around bombing places in secret and not reporting it. And there were people who were upset that we were in Vietnam at all, much less Cambodia.
Right.
So the idea was that if we're in a conflict, you need to disclose everything to Congress periodically, and then we decide what happens next as Congress. It does not say, these are the circumstances, except for imminent threat, these are the circumstances in which you can just automatically willy-nilly get into it and then report to us afterward. That's not how this works. In other words, and this is a very important interpretation, if you're in an illegal war, you still need to report to us. Right? And the reporting is not a justification for getting into a war. You're not allowed to say, oh, yeah, I can bomb anyone I want as long as I report.
Right. The raison d'etre is not the reporting itself.
It's, we don't let cops go around punching people in the face and saying, well, I told my boss.
Exactly.
It's not how this works.
Right.
Illegal is illegal. But if you find yourself in a war, whether it's legal or not, you still have to report to Congress. That's what the War Powers Resolution is all about.
Right.
And so we find ourselves in this really awkward situation where Rubio is saying, well, I'm reporting to Congress, and that's more than they ever did for me. I don't care what they did for you when you were, one of the world's most important and powerful senators. Good for you, by the way. Yes, you should be reporting to Congress. You should have been reporting to Congress all along. You're telling me, in essence, that you haven't been keeping Congress up to date in the negotiation. So let me ask you something, because the natural next follow-up question is, where was the negotiation going? What were you expecting at the end of the negotiation? At the end of the negotiation, presumably, because you were negotiating in good faith, right, Marco? Presumably, it was going to wind up in, what do we call it? A treaty. And what
Right.
do treaties need to be? Ratified. By whom? A bunch of people you were keeping in the dark. So now how is that going to go?
Right.
Right? The whole thing is so inconsistent.
It's inconsistent, and I think it's made worse by the half truths at best. I'm giving people credit, Mike. The half truths that are coming out as justifications. If we wind back just a couple of months,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
initial invasion of Iran, the initial bombing of Iran, was to eliminate their nuclear capabilities. That's what we were told by the president, right? Hey, we're
Yep.
bombing them because they're going to have a nuclear
And I think
weapon.
that that was true.
Right. And what was the proclamation after that initial
Obliterated.
bombing? It was obliterated, done. They won't have a bomb
The
for
big
another
word
20.
was obliterated.
Obliterated. And what did we hear? They are not going to be able to have even this capability for at least another 20, 30 years. That's
And
what we were
you
told.
knew that the giveaway was that he reported to us that it was obliterated before we possibly could have collected the information to back
Uh,
it up
uh,
one way
uh,
or another.
of course. But the point is that, okay, so that's now, again, whether it was something that Minister of Propaganda Miller put out there, whether it was Trump shooting his mouth off against the advice of his staff, take your pick. But that narrative was put out there. We
Yep.
put an end to their nuclear program. And yet it hasn't been 20 years since that strike, Mike. It's been a couple of months. And we
In
now
20
find that,
minutes.
yeah, we need to go back in there. And I think that now is starting to weigh on people. Even people who support the president, even people who support MAGA, now are starting to like say, "What's going on here? Is it that your poll numbers hit 36%, so we had to invade Iran as a distraction? Is it the Epstein files?" Because interestingly, a lot of people had a lot of fun digging up candidate Donald Trump's tweets where he
Mm.
mocked Obama,
Yeah.
saying his poll numbers have bottomed out at 45%. I bet you he's going to drone Iran or Iraq right now. And it was
Yeah.
funny from 2012 when you see these tweets, and then you're saying, wait, your poll numbers are even lower than Obama's were at that point,
And you're dropping more bombs.
and you're dropping even more bombs. And by the way, 50,000 U.S. troops committed to the area, to that region.
Yeah, that ain't
For,
cheap. Two
for
aircraft carrier groups, that does not come
right,
cheap.
for Operation Epic Fury, right? So,
Yeah.
so by the way, ever since they renamed it to the Department of War and they put Hexeth in there, I have to admit, cooler names, right? It sounds like he drank Red Bulls all night and said, "We're going to call this Epic Fury," like let's go, rah!
It'd be epic, bro.
While he's doing push-ups or with three guys on his back or something. But anyway, so do you think there's a lack of trust now? I'm not talking about people among ourselves, like guys like me and you. Forget the Democrats. Um, the president seems to be really only talking to a handful of people. Among them, surprisingly, John Fetterman, the Democratic senator from Pennsylvania, who was
Yep.
all in on this.
Yep.
So, what kind of coalition politically are we looking at? Because MAGA, again, a lot of people are not
It
liking
is
this.
tricky. I think that the president makes less political calculation than for which we give him credit. I think that he is flying a little bit by the seat of his pants. And I don't mean that in the sense that he's making decisions with 15 minutes of thought. What I mean is he's trusting his gut a lot more than he should be, is how I would characterize that. I don't think he's being completely dishonest in this. I think you've got to listen to him closely and accept him at his word sometimes, because he will tell you the truth. Sometimes you
Mhm.
have to wade through a lot of the silliness, but he will tell you the truth. He told us he thought the only limit on his power was his own morality.
Right.
He said that. You don't have to
Stunning.
wonder. He
Right.
does not think that the Constitution, Congress, polls, the American population, or federal statute, or the
Right.
Defense Department, or the cabinet, what allies think, what the British Prime Minister thinks, He doesn't think any of those are limitations on his power.
Right.
And he told us. So I don't, when we wonder, gee, does the president not respect the Constitution? Does he not understand? No, he doesn't care. He told you. If you think that President Trump is worried about congressional pushback, that's on you.
You're right.
Because he told you that he doesn't care.
What was that? I saw something recently. Gary Kasparov, the Russian grandmaster and dissident chess player,
right?
Famous Putin critic.
Yep.
Which
is why he's not there.
Which right. Had an interview with Sam Harris, and one of the lines he said about Trump is, he goes, "You have to listen to what dictators and wannabe dictators tell you, because very often, or almost always, dictators tell you what they're going to do, but lie about what they did." And I thought that was like a really cute little summation there. They'll tell you what they're going to do, and then they'll lie about what they did. So with Trump, he told you he wanted Iran taken care of. He had no problem bombing them. He really doesn't, like you said, he really doesn't give a hoot what the Constitution says. He really doesn't.
No. And for the folks that wanted Iran to be attacked, they don't think that that's a negative, right? And to be fair, as when we opened up, do I think the world could be a better place because of this? That is definitely a possible. I don't know, right? But that is definitely a possible. This is not how I would have handled it. But is it possible that we come out in a better place? Absolutely, that's conceivable. It would require a different regime, a different attitude by the same regime, which seems less likely. It would require a number of things to go right that I think are unlikely, but not impossible.
Right.
So we have to recognize that. And I think President Trump believes the world is going to be better off. He's not doing this because he wants the world to be worse off. He thinks this is going to work, and he doesn't give a damn what anyone else thinks.
Well, what about those who claim that, once again, we're just at the behest of Israel? We're Israel's big bulldog and attack dog in these situations. And here, and again, more as evidence, you had Rubio openly admitting, we did this because of an action Israel was going to take.
Right.
This was not a U.S.
and told us this is not a conspiracy theory. The Secretary of State said so.
That's what I'm saying. It's not like you and I are coming up with goofy conspiracy theories. The guy came on camera and said that. So
right. Well, they were going to attack, so we had to, because we didn't want to be, 24 hours later.
How much do you think that hurts the president, not just in the court of public opinion, which I'm sure it does, and that's all like MTG could rail about, right? Like, we're doing Israel's bidding again.
Yep.
But also in Congress, because look, the duo that everyone is starting to really like Batman and Robin right now, is Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, right? The two of them, they're the ones who got the job done as much as they could on the Epstein
I'm not
file.
Sure Ro wants to be characterized as Robin, but you go ahead.
Well, I never said who was Batman and Robin in that. That's on
you. Hell no. Oh, hell no. Thomas Massie's Batman, okay? He's Batman. Don't even go there.
I agree, but I just left it
No. He's my guy. He's Batman.
Oh, he's my guy too. But here's the thing, right? The two of them said they're going to team up again to bring up the legislation to put an end to this Iran activity.
Yeah.
That they're going to hold the president to account here. They're going to try to get a bill up there immediately.
Because that's what these two guys do. They pass legislation that shouldn't be necessary because we already have the Constitution. But we live in a post-constitutional nation. So these two guys go around. The next thing they're going to do is reissue the 10th Amendment and say, this time we mean it.
The 10th Amendment, the 9th, all of them, right? But to the extent that you now have Rubio on video, without a doubt, saying we did this at the behest of Israel. I'm shorthanding it here. How much do you think that helps Massie and Khanna in the House, possibly Rand Paul in the Senate, to say we got to put an end to this?
I think it helps them enormously. Rubio did clean it up by pointing out, as I believe he really did mean, it was only a matter of timing. But still, it doesn't look good. I'm reminded in the 1950s, I want to say 56, Dwight Eisenhower, then President of the United States, just told the Israeli government, you're going to pack it in. You are not invading one more inch of Egypt, and you're giving back uh, a lot of the Sinai that you've taken. And in those days, the president could boss around the Israeli government. I think these days, the American government still uh, could let the Israeli government know how this works, but we don't. The Israeli government the Israeli government has done a marvelous job, whatever you may feel, right? Has done a marvelous job of influencing uh, American government officials and American opinion toward Israel. And that's not necessarily been a heavy lift for those of us who, I grew up in the Lutheran church, and, among Calvinists on the other side of my family. Huge, deep appreciation for Israel. I've traveled all over Israel. It's a wonderful place, wonderful people, and we all have deep cultural connections to Israel. We love Israel, right? So it's not a heavy sell.
Right.
And they've done a good job with this easy sell over the decades. And so the American people feel very warmly toward Israel, and in many cases have accepted their objectives as worthy of our support, militarily, financially, socially, culturally, every which way. So now, to your point, the question is, in effect, how far is too far, right?
Right.
And I have said for years now, I believe that the Israeli government and the United States government have to forge their own more independent foreign policy paths than they have up until now. That we need to be more clear-eyed and more independent of each other. That we need to stop accepting each other's objectives as our own. And I'm not just speaking to Washington, I'm speaking to Jerusalem. If I were advising the Israeli government, I would advise them, the money's good, and the military backup is wonderful, and presidential influence around the world is fantastic, but we need to be, I would say to the Israeli government, if I were advising them, we need to be more independent.
Right.
And that's so that we develop relationships on our own with partners in the area, national governmental partners in the area, not just through the United States, so that it's not just the United States and Israel against the world. It's not a good look for anybody. One of the reasons a lot of folks resent each of us is because we behave that way, right? Yeah. We look to each other and it's us against the world, and we don't care what anyone else thinks. Plenty of circumstances have arisen over the decades that present not a good look for either of us, much less both of us. And the Batman and Robin of the United States and Israel has done a lot of, it's done a lot of great things for the world and for Israel. But it needs to be more independent. And for very practical reasons for the United States and for Israel. And I would argue for ethical reasons.
Right.
Right. I think one of the things that has split the Republican Party is this resentment. And I don't think it's anti-Israel. There's a lot of accusation goes around that, it's anti-Semitic, blah, blah, blah. I don't buy it. There is anti-Semitism in the United States. Is it growing, as people say? I'll defer to the data. I don't have any particular insight in this regard. But if the United States had spent the last several decades giving a tremendous amount of money, I don't even want to name it, but billions and billions, to another government that had 3/4 of the income of the United States. In other words, this is a wealthy country, especially relative to the Middle East. This is the wealthy country, right? Mm. I mean, there are a couple of other, oil-rich countries that are hard to compete with, but this is the military superpower, very wealthy, very high income, very high tech driven nation in Israel. If there were another country like that, France, right? And we were giving billions of dollars to them year after year, consistently, and they wound up in military conflicts because other people were upset with them for bad reasons. I'll give you that. And we stood up for this government over and over again. And then, decades later, we found that they were dragging us into conflicts. Maybe we're dragging them into conflicts. And the American people started to resent it. Would you say that were because we were anti-French? Or would you say that's a resentment because we query whether our politicians are making decisions that are narrowly defined in the interest of Americans first? I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah, the way I view that sort of thing, Mike, is also that unfortunately it is what it is because the anti-Semitism happens to get bundled in with the policy,
Sure.
like you said, the policy issues. So I think it overlaps, and it's very easy for the people who exploit the anti-Semitism
Yes.
and then use the policy positions as proof of their anti-Semitism, right? To
Yep. Yep.
justify
Yep.
their anti-Semitism. So I think that's why it's a little bit more unique than if it were, say, France or England or Italy or something, or Spain or something like that.
I
Because you,
picked France because a lot of Americans just don't like the French for being French, also.
absolutely, yeah, I can understand that too. But for example, Ukraine is a Christian nation, and a lot of Republicans had no problem shutting off the spigot to Ukraine. And one needs to ask if Trump is willing to send the troops into Venezuela, he's willing to send the troops into Iran. Why was he so unwilling to send the troops and the resources into Ukraine? I'm not saying any one of those three actions is either right or wrong, but it would seem to me that if you justified one of those three actions, you should be able to justify all three pretty much on the same basis, wouldn't you say?
Certainly, you'd be able to make the argument on the same basis. I think someone on the other side of the argument would say, well, it's different when it's Russia. It's different when it's a nuclear power who's going to be pissed off if you intervene. That makes it an issue. And as I was saying about Israel earlier, the deep cultural connection to the Holy Land, historical connective tissue to the people of Israel, uh, to the Jewish diaspora.
Yep.
All these connectivities suggest that it's logical, maybe logical is the wrong word, but natural that we have a stronger connection to Israel, and they have done a good job of leveraging that influence inside the United States. So, as all analogies, they eventually break down and they're imperfect.
Right. All right, Mike, I just want to move on now a little bit from the conflict itself of what's happening over there. We talked a little bit about the politics, but let's also talk about some of the ramifications. One of the more immediate ramifications is the whether you think there's sleeper cells in this country, whether you think there might be just external threats ready to go, however you frame that, we're already seeing some blowback. A lot of people would say, like, well, one of the problems is you can send your army to Iran. All they have to do is send six guys with suitcases over here, right?
Yeah.
It's the retaliation, the blowback is not necessarily pound for pound the same thing. And even though, and again, I will caution this, it's being investigated. But immediately after the attacks, we had a shooting in Texas with a guy, screaming Allahu Akbar and whatever down there. Again, we have to see if it was tied into it. Most people seem to think it did have something to do with it. Um, you're also seeing shock reactions from the markets, commodities prices shooting up, costs going up. The stock market didn't like what was going on after the attack, obviously. Potentially, trade would be impacted in the region, which would come back and impact us. There's blowback, Mike, and part of the blowback also is, let's not forget, funding for DHS got held up. So potentially now you have a lot of MAGA senators, a lot of MAGA congressmen saying, "Hey, Democrats, hey, Thomas Massey, you see what you did? Rand Paul, you guys, you rhinos, now we don't have the funding we need. Quick, let's give even more money to Kristi Noem to do what she thinks may be necessary to protect the homeland." So, Mike, this is all blowback in various degrees. And how do we start making sense of it? What's real? What's just hype? What's an excuse for more executive power?
Well, it's hard to know because a lot of it is just risk management and fear.
Right.
You know, uh, when Franklin Roosevelt said we have nothing to fear but fear itself, he wasn't saying nothing. Fear is a real thing to fear. I mean,
Right.
the fear
Right.
in a sufficient dose can be very damaging.
Right.
And so I think it's logical. Everyone expected markets to react. The two big markets we're talking about are increase in oil prices because people are afraid that Iranian oil could get cut off. Processing in the region could get cut off. It could be even shipping in the region could get cut off. The Iranians are threatening to close the Straits of Hormuz. I don't think that they have the firepower to get that done, but it could be a very dangerous place for the next couple of weeks. I certainly wouldn't want to go swimming through there anytime soon, but I think
Right.
it will get straightened out by the United States Navy. And the other one is the American stock market and international stock markets taking a dip, first of all, because of oil prices going up, but also the United States government borrowing more money is going to put pressure on capital markets, interrupting trade, interrupting international trade. We don't know how certain things are going to go. Will this prompt a recession? I don't think so, but these are the things that markets worry about. To your point, John, assuming the war goes well, I hate to say a war even can go well, but by administration objectives and standards, right? Let's assume that in a month things are violence has stopped. That's the most I think we can hope for. In a small number of weeks, the violence has stopped. Oil markets get balanced out. The threat levels die down. That's the best we can hope for. Okay, assume that just for a moment. The big loss is going to be in terms of trust around the world. Will other nations trust the military decisions made by the executive branch of the government of the United States of America? That's going to be number one. Is the United States a constitutional government any longer? I've argued for 20 years that we live in a post-constitutional nation. I think it'd be very difficult to say that the federal government of the United States is governed by a constitution of the sort that the framers intended. Certainly since 2012, I think it'd be very difficult to make that argument. And what Trump is doing is, I think, symptomatic more than driving it a little bit, symptomatic also. He's demonstrating that he can do whatever. He says so, right? When he says the only limit on my power is my own morals, and then he kills a world leader, takes another one into custody. In essence, commits acts of war in two different places. He's demonstrating that the Constitution doesn't have any teeth anymore. That matters because that's where American exceptionalism came from. American exceptionalism with a capital E. If you don't any longer believe in American exceptionalism, the idea that the American government, the American nation is different from other nations because we are motivated by a set of ideals, not by a common ethnicity, and that those ideals respect individual liberty, and that determines how we project our ethics around the world and limits our willingness to use power. That's American exceptionalism. If you believe in all of that, if you're an outsider looking in at the United States and you believe in American exceptionalism, or at the very least, you believe that we believe it, right? Even if you're
The facade is being kept up, in other words.
exactly, if you're Europe, maybe you believe American exceptionalism is a load of crap, but at least you think that Washington believes it. Then that tells you something about how we're going to behave.
Well, it also dictates how they behave, right? Because again, I go back to that Kasparov interview, and it's fascinating to listen to it from the other side of the Iron Curtain, where obviously he was in the USSR at the height of his chess fame and all that. He said, the guys like us who wanted to leave, who wanted to defect, he goes, the U.S., as hokey as it sounds, was a beacon. It was our beacon for freedom. And
Yes.
he goes, I can't tell you how much Trump has snuffed that out. That it's been getting progressively worse, but with Donald Trump, it's just, like you said, he makes no pretense about it. He says in one sentence, he'll say, the only limitations on my power are my morals. And then in the next breath, I wish I was joking, he says, and I don't think I'm going to heaven. Now, his handlers said, oh, he was just joking. But that's not the point. The point is
It's
that
not the
that's how,
truth either.
I don't think it's the truth, but the point was whether he was joking or not, it shows you where his mindset is, that he thinks his only limitation is himself. And to your point, that's not where American exceptionalism comes from. It's not where our virtue comes from, and it's not where our strength comes from. And to just have the president, I mean, to some extent, I hear what Republicans are saying, right? That it's hypocrisy on the part of the left, it's hypocrisy on the part of Democrats and liberals to accuse Trump of war crimes and whatnot
Of course it is. No
when
one is
Obama,
suggesting that Trump
right,
invented a
right,
diminution of the Constitution.
right. But your justification for these actions can't be the other team did it too. It just can't be, because now you're back at that 5-year-old fifth grade level nana 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 type of argument, and it's what children trade in. It's not what adults and what theoretically America should be trading in, and that might be the most disappointing thing, Mike.
And that's what matters, because children don't understand the long-term implications of their decisions. It's the
Right,
difference between adult humans and other mammals, including uh, young humans. The
right,
difference is, allegedly, adults understand the long-term implications and can plan. And what it is you're planning for in the case of foreign affairs is the nature of those long-term relationships, and what you just said. How do other nations react? What are other nations going? What are other governments going to decide to do? They have to know that you believe in American exceptionalism enough that you're going to restrain yourself because you want to believe that America
right,
is the leading democracy, that is the vehicle for the light that is democracy,
right,
and the liberty that surrounds the idea that it's individual rights that have to be our motivational force.
right.
And if you say, as Stephen Miller essentially has, we don't care about international law. It's, who has the power makes the rules, and no one in Greenland is actually going to stop us. There's only 25,000 people there. Wow, that's something. You might expect somebody who, um, you
That's the
know,
head. That's the head of a banana republic talking. That's literally what it is, right? It's like might makes right. I've got the
yeah,
biggest sword. I've got the most guns, and
yeah. And it's okay if, your job is, you're a head and neck surgeon in Las Vegas, and you say that, you might say, oh, that's kind of quirky, but that's okay. When you're the assistant chief of staff in the White House in Washington, D.C., in the United States of America, and that's your
right,
view, that signals to the rest of the world that they can no longer predict what the White House is going to do based on that earlier set of principles. From now on, it's just whatever the president thinks. Now, presumably, the president is going to be making decisions based on what he thinks is a good idea in America's interest. The positive side, the positive spin on this,
hmm,
if I were the president's advisor, which I'm clearly not, but if
right.
I were to give him a word salad to use to defend himself, this is what I would say. I've made it cool and hip to stand up for national interests in a way that has not been acceptable up until now. I've done it for the United States, and I've done it for other leading democracies. That's what I would say.
Well, that might be his only shot at some sort of salvaging of this, but I don't think it is. I think at this point, everybody who was against the president is even more determined against him. I think he's successfully fractured his base. How much he's fractured off, I don't know. Um, but we'll see. We'll also see who JD Vance is. I still think that in some ways Trump is going to pit Rubio against Vance and Vance against Rubio. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that JD gets Trump's endorsement if Trump's still around in 2028. I think it might be Rubio.
I agree with you, and I think that there might also be others in that fight. But to me,
I'm speaking strictly from the MAGA perspective.
yeah, no, I totally get it. I don't think there's a huge difference there. I think MAGA looks at those two guys and says, these are two guys that used to be anti-Trump. They both came around to be pro-Trump in order to gain power. They both bought into the idea that Trump was going to keep us out of war. And now they both bought into the idea of saying whatever it takes to justify what the boss does, even though the boss is getting us into wars that we didn't expect, that we don't like, that we don't want. I think if these are the big defining characteristics, there's not a lot of difference between the two. In that sense, the big beneficiary would be someone like Rand Paul, who's likely to run for president and who will be very different.
Mm.
And maybe someone, I don't know, another anti-war candidate inside the Republican Party.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. But last question, we're right about at the limit of the show, but final question.
Yes, we're 61 minutes into our 40-minute show. Go ahead.
There you go.
Just for your audience, just so your audience knows, John.
Yes.
When you and I started doing this 60 episodes ago, you told me this was going to be a 40-minute session. I'm pretty sure we have averaged right around 65 minutes, but go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. Inflation. But here's the thing. Do you think that either of the congressional levers that are available right now, whether it's curtailing the war powers resolution or somehow cutting off the funding for the Iran operations that Massey and Khan are going to try to attempt, or the continued non-funding of DHS to the levels they want, thereby allegedly putting the country at risk for terrorist activity, do you think either one of those things as a congressional lever could put enough pressure on President Trump to scale back his nonsense in Iran?
No. I think that he wants what he wants. If he doesn't get what he wants, he'll blame the Speaker of the House. You live by the party, you die by the party. If that's what this is all about, President Trump doesn't fear Congress because it's party rule, right? He expects Congress to fall in line because we're all Republicans. And if that doesn't work out, he's going to be upset and he's going to blame Republican leadership. And in fairness, he's not wrong in the sense that Republican leadership in the House has led him to believe he can do whatever he wants. Well, you tell a guy month after month, whatever you want will fall in line. Then he does something that maybe you're not too sure about, right? Well, I'm sorry, that horse is out of the barn. Now what are you going to do? Now you've gone too far? I'm sorry, that is not going to fly. All of the Democrats would line up against it. The Republican leadership is going to try to avoid this coming to a vote. If war powers comes to a vote, there's going to be a lot of embarrassment, a lot of very difficult decisions. Republicans will have to line up behind the president or risk a backlash. Nobody wants that vote in a midterm election year. But the president doesn't care. He doesn't care about getting those people elected enough to see that what he is doing is politically challenged. He wants to do what he wants to do. And I believe it's because he thinks it's the right thing to do for America. We are hoping he's right in the short run. I believe in the long run, it's a colossal mistake because it undermines the rule of law. But in the short run, let's hope.
Let's hope indeed. All right, everyone, you've been listening to Liberty Lens right here with Big John and my friend Mike Termott. Please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment for us, and certainly subscribe. We really appreciate it. Join us again next week for another episode focusing on another issue of interest to those who appreciate liberty. Until then, peace, everyone.